Hey, last month we had our international conference. By the way, if you want to go to next year's international conference, you can register now at conference.pointofrental.com/IC25. Anyway, we had a panel with our Senior Vice President of Product Development, James Morley. He was up there with a bunch of innovation experts, and I thought it was a super interesting conversation, and you would love to hear it on the front porch. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Front Porch with Brian Beaudry.
Welcome to our innovation panel. We're really excited that not only do we have some of the leaders of our R&D organization at Point of Rental joining me on stage, but we also have some great guests. So if you'd help me welcome Mark Olsen. He is the head of customer solutions for Caylent, a partner that we have that is working with us in our modernization and innovation journey for Point of Rental. And then we have Glenn once again giving us our time from the keynote speech this morning from AWS, so thank you. Evan Fort is our SVP of Engineering and responsible for our global engineering organization. Welcome, Evan. And Collin is our chief architect. So all of you that are elite cloud users, this is a passion project that Collin started many years ago and has developed at scale where we now have hundreds of elite customers being hosted in our own environment. And so we're eager today to have a more interactive conversation with you. Daria is going to run the mic around for questions that we would have. But let's kick off if everyone wants to sit down. The first question that I want to get to for everyone out in the audience is the concept of kind of a culture of innovation and how you're thinking about it within your businesses. So as we talk to customers, they are engaging in different projects and how they view innovations. And then other customers say, well, that's why you work with Point of Rental, because of your innovative culture and what I expect you to bring to us. So let's get an idea of how everybody's thinking about innovation within their businesses right now. That's right. Okay, so as the activity slows down, fairly interesting. I think we're neck and neck between the idea that we have early adopters that look at innovation, thinking about those cycles, but others that are saying, we're very focused on the idea of running our business and optimizing our business, which I don't think are ultimately at odds with each other, and one may be innovation from any other name. So Glenn, I'll start with you to maybe kick this off, but when you think about companies starting to embrace the idea and the culture of innovation, that can be a pretty daunting task, a lot of cost, a lot of risk behind it. How do you start thinking about adopting a culture of innovation within a company?
Yeah, well, I'm actually, it went away. I'll start with the number two answer, the one that was close, and that is we're focusing on what Clayton Christensen would call sustaining innovation, right? We're trying to improve things. We're trying to drive errors and inefficiencies out. That obviously has to be done. The challenge is really around prioritization. So how do you allocate resources to continue to improve, however you want to describe it, your core competency, core offerings, your operations, but also make investments for the future? One of the things I ask almost every one of my customers is, who's your customer of tomorrow? And just like the question, who is the customer, if you add of tomorrow, it's a hard question to answer, very hard. But if you start working on that, you're going to find that that customer of tomorrow is going to want something different than what you're offering today. Now, do you get it from sustaining efforts, getting better, working that project list, or do you get it from something that's completely new and different, something we call non-linear? So how do you prioritize that sort of work? Because I would maintain you have to do both of them. But James, you said something when you phrased the question to me around the cost and the effort. And some of what I talked about today was, how do you actually make the innovation scalable, cheap, fast? That's the way to be able to, especially as a smaller business, do both instead of focusing on one or the other.
And I think, Mark, I'll phrase this to you. Even as a technology company, we look at the daunting task ahead of us and where we want to go. And this is the reason that we sought out a partnership with Caylent to say, how can we accelerate even our own modernization journey? So when you meet with customers and you talk to them about their journey, how do you see them approaching innovation and thinking about, the iterative approach to that?
It's truly a broad spectrum. I would say we see everybody along the people that are trying to push the envelope on their own, and they're at the bleeding edge, and they don't have enough people that are that far ahead of the technology curve. So Caylent can help there in terms of just like technology consulting. But for the most part, with the changes in AI over the last couple of years, we're having a lot of conversations where the strategy is the piece that's missing, and the art of the possible is something that we're having a conversation about. Like, the business brings the business problems to solve, or the opportunity for your customers. Like you really know your customers and what they need, and or how you could serve them better. Sometimes bridging that gap in terms of like what a technology solve would be for those business problems or opportunities is where a technology partner like Caylent can come in and make that happen.
Yeah, great. Anything else, Anything Collin or Evan would like to add?
How much longer is that going to go on for?
Other people do that?
Yeah, it's not just me.
The podcast reporting is going to need a...
We're going to let him finish. Yeah, I think what you touched on with the cost is a very important aspect too. Is as you're looking to expand on innovation and look into maybe new areas within your own market. I've heard some people throughout this week talk about, hey, I mostly rent skid steers, and I'm kind of looking to go to that next thing. I want to look at going and using a backhoe or going to the next kind of piece of equipment. And I think making those types of strides to go and grab something out of your generic market is a type of innovation that our customers can even do. So you don't have to be a technology company. And I want that to be kind of the theme of this panel, is even though that Point of Rental is a technology company, like innovation is something that anyone can do and everyone's expected to do.
One thing companies of all sizes have trouble doing is killing stuff. And the reality is, everybody will nod and agree, the reality is your resources are finite, time is finite. Everybody agrees with that, but companies almost to the company have a really hard time deciding, even though we generate some revenue from this sort of activity, we actually shouldn't be doing it, because that time and money is better spent over here. So for company leaders, and it doesn't have to be ultra complex, how do you sketch out how you make decisions and how you evaluate the data that you have, how you make the right choices for your business and your customers? Because it's actually easy to find a lot of things to do. It's hard to find fewer things to do that are going to be much more productive for your business.
Yeah, part of the sunk cost fallacy also has a big predicate on your ego not being able to give up on something that you've already spent time, effort, and money on. And so as you're trying to make those new strides, next year with innovation, or trying to use Gen AI or whatever kind of new hot technology is coming out, you have to be willing to say, we tried something, it didn't work, it failed, we wasted some money, but the data that we learned, and gleaned from that is something that's of value. So every type of response to these types of innovations that you do, you're going to be able to drive forward to make things even better, but you have to accept the failures that come with it.
And in some cases, it's buy versus build, right? Point of Rental has a platform that's you're not going to beat your competition in that space. Leverage the platform. For us as a consulting partner, Amazon Web Services has a ton of products that are built, and there's no reason to compete with them. In some cases, we're months or weeks ahead of something that they build, but like, there's no further value in investing in something that somebody else is doing better. It's about when you can bring your unique customer needs, your unique data, along with technology to stay ahead of your competition.
Yeah, we focus a lot, or we have been in the last year or two, on what we were calling personas. So we have like a yard persona, or we have a counter persona, or we have a mobile or a driver persona. And when you're looking at expanding on either, a new product or expanding on a new initiative, buying versus building is a big thing to approach. And we started to take the approach, or product specifically is really taking the approach of look at it from a persona. So like, as a yard worker, what is it that would make my time more efficient, or what would cost something less if I were to do X? And so looking at those things really help you narrow down the buy versus build mentality.
Yeah, and Point of Rental wants to be your partner in that too. So we are constantly trying to figure out and look into the future at what the next innovation is going to be. And what we've been hearing from you guys as well is a big focus on customer self-service and mobile functionality, weaving AI into that experience to try to create the experience that your customer of the future wants. And so we're definitely leaning into that, and we'd love your feedback about where you think your markets are going to.
That is, whether intentional or not, probably a perfect segue to the next question that I wanted to ask everybody in the audience. So we've started kind of very large and broad, the concept of innovation, the culture, but let's get more specific to the rental industry. And as we see all of these things coming at us between generative AI, automation, et cetera, what do we as a group think are the biggest drivers of change and the things focused? So if you would, take a look at our next Slido question and give us your feedback to where we want to steer our conversation. So I think as the results come in, the first impression I get are fairly interesting, is we certainly will get a stack rank winner, but there's not an overwhelming winner. We're pretty divided as a group of all the things that we see coming, and so maybe there needs to be a all of the above answer at the bottom. But so far, data analytics, customer expectations for digital self-service seem to be some of the more prevalent areas that we're as a group saying. So let's talk about data analytics, predictive maintenance, et cetera. We've seen partners out here between Rouse, Smart Equip, the work that Point of Rental is doing. Collin, you just led an AI panel to talk about how we can use AI as a powerful tool here. What are some of the outcomes that we heard already from customers?
Yeah, I found it really interesting. So there's really three areas that we can look to impact customers when it comes to AI or any sort of machine learning, big data. So we have the consumer side of things. So our customers, which are you guys, your customers, we call that the consumer. So someone that comes into a rental store, how they're interacting with your web presence, how they're communicating on an e-com platform, those types of things. And then we look at it from what we call a frontline user experience. So your staff, you and your staff. So how do we, if I'm in the yard, how do I do this, or how do I do cycle counts? All of these types of activities. And then the third way is what we call back office or data-driven decision making. And that was actually the overwhelming theme in yesterday's session, was that you guys are really looking for data-driven assistance from being able to use historical information to make future decisions. Whether that's, hey, I have this amount of money to go spend and invest in new equipment, what should I go buy to maximize my return on investment? Or, hey, I have this item, it's rented 1,000 times, the trends say that at 1,001 times, the fan belt breaks. So all of these different types of predictions are things that we're trying to key in on, and it's part of kind of the overall data platforming efforts that we're doing internally at Point of Rental. So we're really trying to hone in, like with this whole AI revolution, things that are going to impact the customer that directly affect the ROI that you have on a per item basis.
So I'm curious to hear from the rest of the panel, but what I would say is that if you as a business has been approaching this either from a we've tried this or we have a question that we'd like to hide the panel, go ahead and raise your hand and let Daria make her way towards you, and we'd like to turn this into a little bit more audience Q&A. So anyone else want to weigh in on that aspect, either that or the idea of digital self-service?
Yeah, so how many people are using telematics in order to kind of get information about your equipment? That's pretty common. And are by show of hands, are you guys also able to see like hour meter and be able to track like when you need to go do oil changes on site and stuff? Yeah, and so we've been thinking about this as well and what the future of that looks like. So being able to tie in the real-time information we're getting from equipment with our back office information to be able to be more predictive about what's happening. And so I think that that's going to be part of that future direction as we think about knowing what's happening with our equipment in real time, is being able to actually get that information. So it's beyond just where is my equipment, but it's also what's happening with my equipment.
So I look at 1 and 3 as kind of the same thing, same question, because in number 1, almost all of that's going to be done with AI. Number 2 is about your customers and kind of what I was talking about before, what their expectations are, how they are changing. And when you look at every big technological revolution that's happened, like in my lifetime, from the introduction of the personal computer, the internet, mobile, cloud technologies, and now generative AI, every single one of them captured the consumer first. And the consumer started applying pressure to businesses to catch up. And so I don't know if anybody wants to share, but I would love to hear around question number 2, what are you seeing from your customers around that's an indicator of where they're going in how they prefer to interact with you? Does anybody want to share that?
Doug?
Put in rental lockers for after-hour pickups and drop-offs, and we got that going this year. And we're getting people that will rent a carpet cleaner while our store is open from the locker, just because they're used to doing that, everything online and doing it. And our after-hour drop-offs, people like to be able to do it on their own time and drop it when we're not there. And it's worked out really well.
Convenience, yeah. Thank you.
Kind of expanding on what Evan talked about with telematics and the customer expectation. We provided the telematics information, the minutes used for the customer to see, and then they could actually make they can make good decisions on whether or not they need to keep the rental going, if it's being that equipment's being utilized as well on the job site. Just giving that transparency to the customer has changed some of their thought process with the way that they like utilizing our customer portal. And so that's kind of where we've kind of transformed a little bit off of that piece alone. So
you're making decisions based off of what the customer impact is for what their usage of that piece of equipment is?
We're not making decisions. We're letting them make decisions. We're letting them have all the data in front of them to make decisions on their own for that piece. At first, it was one of those things we were worried about shooting ourselves in the foot. Mm-hmm. They would, get stuff off rent quicker. But I think that line of transparency has added a layer there of trust when it comes to our customer.
So Trey, have you seen a certain amount of things potentially coming off rent quicker, but you're proposing that the balance between transparency and customer experience has paid off, or have you come to a different conclusion at this point?
It's the first there. When things do come off rent, that trust has changed a little bit. A lot of people give us a lot of compliments on the telematics side that we've added there. So I feel like I think it's something that the customers don't know. I hate to say this, customers won't know what they really need until they see it. It was one of those things where we gave them this and they were like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So we've been utilizing that piece quite a bit. We're looking to expand more with that and provide more health of the equipment along those lines, try to produce those fields for people so they can look at it.
How are you actually, I'm just out of curiosity, how are you providing the data to the customer? Are you emailing them? Are you sending them a report or calling them?
We have a customer portal that we had started years ago that we actually provide that in their customer portal for any of our equipment that has a track unit on it. So that's how we do it.
Yes, coming back, you alluded to it, but obviously customers may be renting something a shorter amount of time. If they see utilization drop off, you feel the trend in customer trust going up. Do you have the data and analytics to prove it yet, or is it still a newer initiative?
Still in a foggy area right now. I don't have the data to prove it, but you can tell from the reaction and the conversations that we're having. So
there has been some feedback where they've moved equipment to a job site to continue the rental because they've realized they're in X phase and they move it to the next one. They'd much rather pay a move fee on a contract than restart their month because they like that rate. The other sidebar is we had one job site that they had kind of mothballed it due to some permitting issues, and all of a sudden the telematics were moving. It actually alerted the customer that not only was our equipment being stolen, but theirs was too. So just some odd offshoots, and like you said, we're still building in the data and gathering it, but those are just a couple of examples of things that we have gotten feedback definitely from customers on. So.
Yeah. No, great feedback. Thank you. Anyone else? I saw a few more hands up.
Yeah, while we switch mics, I think that's a good indication of this panel, right? That's something that's really could have potentially been disruptive to your business, really innovative to suggest customers potentially rent shorter amount of time to build that trust. So that's kind of those kinds of counterintuitive ways of thinking that are not necessarily linear, not necessarily about what we're going to make this week, more about what we're going to make this month, and this customer relationship is kind of the more innovative companies are thinking in that way.
Oh, sorry, I thought I saw another hand up. Please.
So this one's more on like the Record 360 side of things, but the customers want to be able to see pictures through the portal. They want to be able to track rentals and then have like a good notification of when that rental is cycling as well. Because depending on how you do your billing, whether it's 28 days or 30 days, sometimes the customers can't keep track with that. And we experience a lot where the customer calls in on a cycle and a day rental, and then you have to go through and credit the 1 day rental, make it go away. So if the customers, what we do is we do call the customer, we call it callbacks. But if if there was a digital self-service or an AI tool that could notify the customer, hey, this is coming up, do you want to continue? And then the customer can click yes or no, reply to something, that'd be helpful.
So you see customers having higher expectations of what they can get fed to them via notifications, chatbots, et cetera, that type of thing as well?
Yeah, for sure. Not so much on the ordering side of it, because we don't want the customer, we want to talk to the customer when they're ordering the piece of equipment to find out, hey, what exactly do you need? So we can help them out that way. But then once that's set up, calling something off, checking pictures, seeing when your rental is going to expire, stuff like that.
And obviously customer self-service is one of the other key pieces that we have here. I know, Evan, we've been working a lot with the consumer portal. We see a lot of future coming from that. When we think about enabling customer self-service at point of rental, what are we looking at deeper in the near future?
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised how quickly customers took up the ability to pay online. So just click a link and pay their bill. And I think that's good for all of us, right? Like we want we want to be able to make it as easy as possible to collect that money. But the consumer portal has it's a key investment for us in how we're trying to push innovation forward in order to help you guys. So, Trey's been talking about some of the things they're doing at SitePro, and those align well with the direction that we're seeing our consumer portal growing as well. So being able to put way more of that in the hands of the consumer to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning so that they don't have to call your staff to call something off rent or see where their inventory is, if something's on the job site, maybe even set the ability to get alerts based on what's happening with their rental, continue rentals, pay their bills, all those kinds of things.
You make a good point there too, because we do a lot of pre-drops and pre-deliveries, and the customer wants to know, hey, did that get delivered at early this morning? Where is it? Because it's 7 a.m. I'm here. Where's the machine? Did it get delivered? So then that's an extra phone call. Whereas if they they do, but again, going back to they want pictures, they want to see where it's at.
Yeah.
And then also on the payment thing that you mentioned, we do a lot of customer-owned equipment repairs on site where they're not a big customer of ours that's renting from us frequently, so we don't want to set up the consumer portal for them. It'd be awesome if there was a way to just charge them right there in the field, but again, you can't close work orders, so just for the customer-owned machine seamless process, there needs to be some innovation there.
Would you charge their credit card right there, or would you raise an invoice for the back office to go collect?
We'd want to charge a credit card right there.
Okay. Yeah, and if you attended the GPI talk yesterday, they talked a little bit about some future functionality that they're working on as well, like an Android device that has a credit card reader built in. That is something that we're looking at. Of course, we have to integrate that into our solution, but it's kind of a future-looking perspective on what we could do for payments. If somebody's standing right there and the track fell off the skid steer, you're going to charge them to put that track back on? Yes or no? I know that's a big debate, but will they have the credit card standing right there to pay you before you walk away? Like, I feel like you're going to collect your money more likely.
I mean, when your toilet backs up and you call your local plumber, does he charge you before he unclogs the toilet, or does he unclog it and then he charges you?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about generative AI kind of at a high level. We had a focus group yesterday on it and got some great feedback. But if you look at the data from the last Slido that we did, we don't have a group of people that are leaning into this. Maybe that's representative of our industry, et cetera. Maybe it's still fairly new, only 2 years in. But I'll play the skeptic for a minute, and there's been buzzwords out there like big data, blockchain, et cetera, that have come around years and years. And so if you're sitting here as an owner, et cetera, and you're hearing the buzzwords happen all over LinkedIn again, what is it that's about generative AI that really is that hockey stick moment that we think that this is truly going to be transformative? Not to say that those other innovations haven't changed industries and haven't pushed us forward, but is generative AI going to be different? And maybe what is generative AI? Are we talking about a number of different things under one big umbrella? How should owners and how should employees be really thinking about this for the next few years?
Yeah, I think when I think of generative AI, this is Glenn's favorite topic is Gen AI. I feel like a lot of people for many years have, they've all seen the Terminator and seen Skynet and seen all the things that AI do, right? And that's sometimes what the forefront of our thought is with artificial intelligence. But at its core, what it is it's Google that can expand the concepts that people are unaware of. And so what I mean by that is if you need something done, if you want something, it can improve whatever it is that you're doing by making it more efficient. And so a simple way that a lot of our customers are using it is they use it for email or content generation, right? You want a blog post, you want to send some emails. You can type in the general concept of what it is that you want, and it will produce for you whatever that copy is that you would put on your blog, things like that. I use it all the time. I've used it for a lot of these presentations that we've given this week for content for slide decks. You put in the general concept of what you want to do, and it will output things. And so when you hear these big buzzwords like, oh, this thing was trained or this thing has a model, those are kind of intricate details that I think aren't generally important to the movement of Gen AI. Training is just, it's learning based upon information on the internet. But from a simple perspective, it is an enhanced version of an assistant or Google or something that can just improve whatever it is that you're doing it to make it more efficient. And we're using it every day. Our developers are using it. Like I said, I'm using it for slide presentations and emails to craft them in more articulate ways. But it's something that you guys can do on a day-to-day basis by using something like ChatGPT. And yesterday, I think I'd like to say in this room, because I think about 90% of the people in the last room were using it. How many people in here are using some form of Gen AI, whether that's ChatGPT or anything like that? So yeah, quite a few people. So it's interesting because if you go back 10 years, AI was a thing, but nobody was really talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good. So I think we're both a little hesitant to talk about generative AI out of just fatigue. It's been 2 years of talking about it and having some basic conversations. That's not to say that it's not an important topic. It's just that we've run through it a few times. Not enough hands were raised in the room, I would say. I'd challenge everybody that didn't raise your hand, if you're not using ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude or Perplexity AI for search or some of those tools like that. I'm not challenging you individually. What I would suggest is that your competition probably is. So your competition's moving a little bit faster than you, and that may be all it takes to get ahead over time, right? Just 2% faster every week or every month, and pretty soon they're going to be strangely way ahead. That said, as a cautionary note, when you're using generative AI to create content or anything that's going to be customer facing, definitely anything that's like, if you're trying to create a legal document that way, I might have some cautions for you. One of the good ways I've heard it talked about is, like, think about it as an intern. You can get lots of output out of an intern, but you're probably going to want to check their work. So it's always, in the case of the way that we work with our customers, we absolutely use generative AI to accelerate the pace, which with our engineers deliver code, sometimes diagrams and things like that. But we're responsible for the output that we put out there. So that's the sort of balance of it. I would say the one thing I wanted to tee off, though, you were talking about AI 10 years ago. Like, it was magic. It's things that, like, Google was doing AI and big companies like that. It's internal research labs and PhDs. The one really nice thing that generative AI has done for us over the last couple of years is really make that accessible, put it in the hands of people, have more imagination about how it can impact your business. And so that, to me, that's been the huge upside, is just it's sort of removing constraints and letting people's imaginations run wild. And a lot of times those are really transformative business advances that it's made.
I really like the theme and the analogy you touched on as an intern. I think every one of us have watched a presentation, et cetera, about X is coming for our jobs at a certain point. And to a certain degree, we're all sitting in the room employed. And so it hasn't come to fruition, even though I took the presentation 10 years ago saying robotics, et cetera, we're all coming. And so the idea of an intern is, I think, the way that we look at it, of an accelerator, et cetera. You named a few tools. Perhaps one of the things that would benefit is, what are those tools and what are some of those best practices for where AI is today that an audience like this should be thinking about? That there may be some skeptics or laggards, but it also may be that there's so much noise around it. What are the best practices when you start thinking about using generative AI in a productive way in your business today?
Since I have the mic, I want to take one step back. Then we can answer that. So I was in a meeting with a customer a couple months ago, and they were trying to find some Gen AI use cases. And they were having a hard time conceiving of the fundamental way generative AI operates. So I had one of those coffee cups that comes out of the machine in front of me, like styrofoam, and it had some design on it. I took a picture of it with a popular generative AI app, Anthropic Claude, and I asked it I said, describe this. That's all I said. And within 10 seconds, it had fully written out everything about that cup. It identified it as a coffee cup. It looked at the design on it. Everything within under 10 seconds. I then said, okay, I want something like this, and I changed the rules on it. I want the design to be different, and I gave it some things, and then it, within seconds, mocked up a different coffee cup. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, Glenn, who cares about coffee cups? But the first thing is speed. It did it blazingly fast. One thing that's getting missed by a lot of people is the hardware, the processors, and the infrastructure this is running on is faster than anything we've ever seen before. And speed is always an advantage, no matter what. The second thing is, what if you were querying a genome that it has a huge amount of data and detail, and you're asking it, describe what you see here. And quickly, it comes back and tells you what it describes. And then you ask it, now, if I want to do this, I'm not a genomics person, whatever they're even called. I want to do this, or tell me why this is that way. It's going to answer you depending on the data that you're giving it. The coffee cup example was just a off-the-shelf large language model. But if you're training this sort of technology on some of the most detailed, complex data ever, and asking it the questions, and it can give you something back that would take you months to respond to, and then give you insights that you never would have arrived at. That's the potential in generative AI. So it really is, 10 years ago, 2014, was when big data that was on our lips. Big data revolution. This is the big data revolution. Gen AI is going to unlock all of your data. Tell me what portfolio of machines I need to have 14 months from now. Would that be useful for your business?
And similar to the difficulties of genomics or genetics, using Elite, which is a very complicated, extremely extensive application that take a lot of you guys years to learn. We're trying to make strides in training models or having our own AIs learn about the system so that it can do things like make suggestions or automatically fill out contracts or do these things and save you guys time. So we had a big theme yesterday around AI where people were focused on, hey, it's hard to onboard a new employee here because they don't know how to use the system. It takes time. How did they learn it? It'd be great if we had some sort of knowledge base that I could go access, almost a David Jensen bot, basically. And so we've effectively started doing that internally. We've started to created an actual David Jensen bot where we trained it off of data from Slack and Salesforce and all this information about use cases where I may have messaged Dwayne and asked him something and he replied back. And so it sifts through all of that. And over time, it's just learning better and better information to where soon you'll be able to ask a question specific around Elite to say, hey, how do I do this? Or why didn't I do that? And the next iteration of those are, instead of having to ask it, the AI itself just intuitively knows, hey, this is the next step of what I need to do for this contract, so I'm going to go ahead and go do it. So it's not going to, I don't think, replace that many jobs in the future. I think it's more aligned with, at some point in time, we had people that drove horse and buggies. And while we're maybe changing the way in which autonomous vehicles work or changing the way in which people interact with different systems, those people are able to get more efficient, more quick responses because of the AI that gets in place. And so with Elite, as we start adding these things, writing contracts becomes faster, or putting things off rent becomes faster, and it becomes faster because you have to do less work to actually select those things.
Yeah, and if I could give you guys a suggestion of somewhere to start, those of you who haven't used like ChatGPT before, every year we do a couple of things we call hackathons where we get all the developers in a room and we buy them unlimited Red Bull. And we say, just live here for the next 3 days and come up with something cool. And half the projects this last year were all based on some sort of AI model. And some of the big things, the big themes that we're still trying to digest and figure out whether they actually apply to our customers and how we would use them. But ChatGPT already knows the carrying capacity of all of your equipment. It knows how much fuel they take. It knows where that one bolt is that you have to undo in order to connect the other thing, you know. And so when your customer calls in and says, and asks you a question about a piece of equipment that you have and you don't know, maybe try ChatGPT, and then you can go confirm it with the manual. But it knows a lot of stuff, and it might save you guys some time in your customer service.
We have about 10 minutes left before lunch. We have one or two questions we could get to, but I don't want to constrain the opportunity we have with everyone on the panel for the questions we have. To the broader audience, does anybody have something they've started, struggled with as a project, feedback on their path of innovation, best practices, ChatGPT, generative AI, et cetera, that they want to pose as a question or a best practice to the panel? Has anybody struggled with something, said, hey, we tried to pick this up, but just couldn't make it work, and we've abandoned it, et cetera? You know, how, if I was going to do it again, would try to do this? Incredibly successful projects with innovation
They're
happening
hungry.
all over the place.
How are people using AI now as it relates to the data that you have within Elite? I think most people in this room are using Elite. Is anybody taking data out of the system and asking questions to ChatGPT like, hey, what was my ROI on this? Or hey, what was the, what's the next service interval going to be for this? Is anybody doing anything like that? Yeah, that's a good point. So there's a lot of, when you say AI and when you say machine learning, everybody always asks like, well, you have the data, why can't you just do some statistics and figure that out? But that's effectively what ChatGPT is doing when you're feeding it that data. It's just running the statistics and reporting for you. So when you look at the reports that we currently have in Elite, they'll provide you things like ROI per item, or what's your inventory off rent utilization, all of those types of things. The big thing where ChatGPT and these large language models come into play is predictions based upon that information. So you can say, I had all these chairs in this, for an event role company, I had 100 chairs at 80% utilization. Well, that's, first of all, it's not 80% utilization across all 100 chairs. That might be 200% utilization on chair number 1 and 112% utilization on chair number 7 and 4% utilization on chair number 98. But if I want to know, based upon all that information, what happens if I go and I get 200 chairs? Or what if I go and get 300 chairs? Or instead of buying a bunch of Bobcats or skid steers this year, what if I go get a full dump truck or whatever and rent that? What's my success rate going to get? And so training that off of a community of data is how it gets better to make predictions.
So you feed it the data to be able to ask it those questions.
Correct. Yeah, you're basically, that is what training means. When you hear people talk about AI training of models and stuff, all you're doing is you're feeding it data. It is taking that data, storing it off, and then iteratively querying that data for you. And so it can make what's called inferences off of that data to help predict things that happen and the propensity for them to be successful in the future. And so if you say, hey, what happens if I do go get a full-size backhoe instead of just another skid steer? It can look at all of the data across the board and predict what might happen if this, using the historical data that we've already fed it, it can help predict that. Whereas from a reporting standpoint, you're just able to see, well, what happened, not what will happen.
So what data do you recommend we extract out of POR to feed ChatGPT?
Well, we're doing a lot of stuff internally to try and help provide features that are going to, make those answers for you within our product that you don't have to go to ChatGPT for. I was just generally curious if anybody is already taking some of that data, like your utilization values or anything like that, to help make predictions or help suggest ways in which you should go. If you have some money to invest in a new piece of equipment, I'm curious if anybody is using that data or using Gen AI to help say, you know what, you should go buy this instead of that.
I mean, I'm definitely interested, but do you feed it an Excel file? Do you feed it the report?
You can do all of those things. You
Okay.
can go to ChatGPT. So for those of you that
ChatGPT will tell you, hey,
Yeah,
what data do I update from POR? They'll tell me.
yeah, it probably would. So
Okay.
you can upload things. If you haven't done that feature yet, you can go and click upload, and you can upload an Excel document, or you can upload a numbers file, and you upload that in the CSV, and it'll just say, hey, tell me about X, or tell me about how I can better do this, and it'll make suggestions to you.
Cool.
Can I share one caveat?
Yeah, they're not always right. That's the commitment.
That, just like humans. But if you're putting in your data to a public model like that, it's using your data to enrich the model. So it's important to know that if you have confidential information or proprietary information for your business, you should explore whether or not you want to, in that fashion, like ChatGPT, upload a spreadsheet if you want to do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's some settings in ChatGPT when you do the paid version that you can turn off the training of those models. Now, whether you trust if they're really not training off of it is a different thing. But for a point of rental specifically, we have our enterprise ChatGPT subscription. We don't let ChatGPT train off of our data. However, we take that with a grain of salt and don't fully believe they're not training off of it. So things we're passing them, we don't pass sensitive information. So yeah, that was a very good point.
So nobody's data is absolutely perfect. Ours is probably 90%, and then sometimes we have custom data, if you want to call it. So how does ChatGPT, cipher out the not good data or custom data? And does it take see most of it is like this, and it feeds off of that?
Yeah. So for the most part, it's only as good as the data that you give it.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like Google 10 years ago or Google now. It's only going to give you as good of an answer of things that you ask it. Right. And so if you ask it how to do heart surgery, it's going to give you what search results on Google come back for step-by-step instructions for heart surgery. If you ask ChatGPT how to do heart surgery, it will tell you based upon how it was trained off of Reddit. And so that might not be the best thing.
Don't ask that question.
Yeah, don't ask that question. Yeah.
Coming back to your question about data, one of the 2 years ago when we were starting to talk about this, it's a new and emerging trend, and like everybody's running around trying to figure it out. One of the first ways we started talking about it as a consultancy was like exactly that of like, get your data right, apply AI on top of it, because to the earlier point, 10 years ago, AI ML, very, very sensitive to perfect data or very, very good data. Today, what we're advising customers is start with the data that you have, experiment with it using AI. If you're finding the results are promising but not good enough to go to production, then close that data quality gap however you can. We don't have specifics about your use case, but presumably if you know the data is low quality, you know what good is. So you can start to measure and either filter out the questionable data or improve it at its source. But most businesses aren't going to improve their data just to improve data. They're like, most people don't have that scorecard. But if you have a business case that is AI driven, that's powered by data, that just needs the data to be a little bit better to get over the threshold of amazing your customers or improving your back office or whatever you're trying to achieve, then like that sort of can drive that change and that investment from leadership or however you prioritize.
And I'll give you a tangible example of what we've done, and now we've run into that same kind of thing. So we have heard that people don't like picking up the phone and waiting on hold to get in contact with someone from support, right? And so when we're overstaffed, it becomes, or when we're over leveraged from phone calls, it becomes very difficult, not only on us but on our customers. So we're looking at using AI as chatbots to be able to more rapidly respond instantly to provide information to you guys. And so when we're looking at solving for questions within Elite, which is a complex application, we have to have the data ourselves that suggests back to you the answers that are correct, right? And obviously Reddit is not trained on point of rental. And so when looking at how do we eventually provide those types of solutions, we're not there for being able to provide a chatbot in a support fashion today. But tomorrow we might be, as long as we start capturing the data now and start planning for okay, how do we iterate over this and collect better data tomorrow and even better data the next day?
So I think we're at the final 2 minutes of the time that we have, and we know that lunch is as important as anything else to keep everybody fed and energized. Any final opportunity for a question to the panel, a comment, etc.?
Glenn, you mentioned that companies have a hard time killing things. Is there a particular type of thing that they have a hard time killing, or is there any insight that you could provide further on what would be best to kill?
The two types are one where they're realizing a not insignificant amount of revenue from, and the other is something that has some sort of political tie. So a certain person, it's their baby. Nobody wants to call the baby ugly. So that's why that have backbone, disagree, and commit element of our culture is so important, because we know we have to ruthlessly prioritize in our business, and a lot of those decisions are going to be tough decisions for somebody. So those are the two, and both take a lot of sort of company courage and individual courage to do. This company I was talking with recently, you could tell they don't want to let go of something that's bringing $1 in. And the more we talked about the big idea they had, the more energized they got. They really had a lot of confidence that this could be a game changer for the company. Yet taking something that short term was going to give them revenue, eliminating it, freeing up those resources to apply to that, they just couldn't get themselves to do it. So maybe that's a third thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Good question.
Well, we're at time. I want to say thank you very much to the whole panel, especially Mark and Glenn, for being generous with your time. Great conversation. We hope you'll stick around and spend a little bit more time with us, but thank you all very much. Thanks.